investigative journalist who I love to talk to and I love to work with whenever possible. John, you've got some really interesting new disclosures around January 6th, specifically video footage that you've been looking through. Tell us, what have you found?
Well, listen, this builds on the great reporting that Epoch Times itself has done on January 6th. And we now know that there were so many more security failures that weren't really highlighted by the January 6th committee, or quite frankly, fixed by it. And also some political shenanigans that went on both during the day of January 6th and in the aftermath when the hearings came out. So let me start with the shenanigans and I'll work our way back to the security failures. We know the morning after January 6th that Nancy Pelosi held as Speaker a press conference saying that it was traumatizing to have to leave the Capitol the way she did. And of course, I'm sure it was. It was a violent day. We know that. But actually, the exit was much different than what she described it. And that is, she brought her daughter along, Alexandra, and her daughter, a filmmaker, turned the exit into a movie-making movement. It was basically a Hollywood exit where Alexandra Pelosi is filming, sometimes running in front of the security detail through the secret halls and passageways that are used to evacuate the Speaker of the House in a calamity like this. And we interviewed the chief at the time, Chief Stephen Sund. Now, he was fired by Pelosi a couple days after the tragedy, but he said, listen, that my security detail was distracted because of this. It was not the way they were supposed to exit. And when we got to the escape car, which is an armored vehicle, we had to give up one of our assets, one of our security assets in the car so that Alexandra could go in with her mom. And that left the security detail one short of the optimum force protection that would normally be there on an evacuation. So a personal choice by the Pelosi's actually compromised not only their own security, but kept the Capitol Police from doing the evacuation the way they would have done it by training. So that's the first day. So you get some sense that even in the midst of the crisis, Democrats saw this as a Hollywood moment. When they get around to having their hearings in last summer, starting in June, exactly 1 year ago this month, the Hollywood moment making keeps going on. We all remember that famous sizzle tape that Benny Thompson played at the opening of the hearing. And in that tape, you saw some really amazing scenes of the Capitol being breached near the front door, both from the outside and the inside. And they had very dramatic sound. And when I started reviewing the security footage a few weeks ago, I realized there's no sound on it. And well, it turns out that the January 6th committee doctored those videos. They injected their own sound, and in at least a few places, they did not tell the American public. There's no disclaimer that the sound isn't on the tape or that they brought in some other sound.
We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol to the upper level!
And so a little bit of Hollywood movie making actually misleads the American public. We talked to Alan Dershowitz, the great Harvard law professor, and he said, if this was done in the court, the lawyers would have been disbarred or penalized by a judge. This is a very serious ethical breach, he said. So we have that part. So that's the movie making Hollywood sensation. Now we're going to start to transition into the security issues. And over the weekend,
John,
yeah, please.
Let me just jump in briefly.
Please.
So That sounds incredibly serious. Now, from what I understand, I was reading, you have a detailed article on this topic.
Yeah.
The response was that, well, actually, we disclosed that we made these alterations and so forth. What do you make of that?
They disclosed in some parts of the video. In some parts of the video, they did a little thing saying Metropolitan Police sound, right? They did not do it in the key part of the tape, which is where the breach occurs, which is, by the way, 2 closed circuit television cameras from the Capitol Police for which there never was any sound. There is no disclaimer. There is no notice of it on there. That part is made to look just like that audio is part of the tape, and it clearly isn't. And by the way, it's very dramatic audio because you hear officers shouting and other things. It's just not on the tape, nor is there disclaimer. Elsewhere on that tape and other tapes, occasionally they would put a flash saying the sound is from another source, but not on the most important part, the breach. The breach was the focus that night, and they did not. You can look at the tapes yourself. And when we went back to them and said, there is none on here, they're like, oh, well, I guess we should have. So there was sort of a backhanded acknowledgement that they dropped the ball on that. So that is the current state of facts as we have them as of this morning.
Yeah, it's absolutely remarkable. I guess there's also some sort of, congressional reaction to this, or some sort of congressional action that might happen in response to this.
That's right. So Congressman Loudermilk, who inherited the January 6th investigation when the Republicans took over, he says he's going to look at some options. He considers it a very serious matter. Some lawmakers are suggesting that they might file an ethics complaint against some of the members of the House January 6th committee. We'll see if that happens. But there are some unhappy people about what happened in that circumstance. And again, it's not a hard thing to do. We as journalists, I blurred out a part of the Nancy Pelosi exit at the request of the police because it showed some security countermeasures. We're very clear. We say it, hey, we blurred this out for very specific reasons. Disclosure and transparency is key to that. And in this case, that didn't happen, and it is what it is. So we have to, we will have to watch and see what the Republican House now does with this information.
No, and speaking of Congressman Loudermilk, he's also been looking at, and this is just incredibly bizarre to me, some potential withholding of critical intel prior to this whole thing happening. So he was on your show recently, and what have you found there?
Yeah, so this follows up on some great reporting that you all did at Epoch Times and we did at Just the News. And what we see is that we know from whistleblowers inside the Capitol Police Intelligence Unit that they had all the warning signs that they needed. They knew the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were talking about committing violence that day. They knew specifically some of the tactics the extremists planned to use that day, like targeting the tunnels, maybe killing cops. All of that was in this intelligence that came in from 9 separate federal agencies, including Homeland Security, the FBI, the Marshal Service, the NYPD, and Metropolitan Police, among many others. So the intelligence division of the Capitol Police had it, but Chief Sund says it never got to him, and some of the investigations found it didn't get to him as well. So he was flying blind. He set a security plan that was way below the threat level that was in the intelligence that wasn't shared to him. What Congressman Loudermilk told us on Friday is that he has identified a few people of interest, that's what he calls them, people of interest, who he believes may have been involved in keeping that intelligence to themselves and not sending it up the chain. A very fateful decision. If that intelligence had been sent up the chain, think of what could happen. We would have had a lot more civil disturbance units deployed that day, which would have made it easier to put down the breach. That's something that Chief Sund acknowledges he would have done. He probably would have won his argument to get the National Guard to be sent in the Capitol, something he was turned down on. So the decision to withhold that intelligence becomes very fateful from a security posture. Loudermilk says we think we know who did it, and we're in the process of interviewing and pressing them. More to come on that, but that could be one of the largest security failures that comes out of the reinvestigation of the investigation.
I mean, there's so many levels at which this, basically didn't work. There's these political angles. There's this, it's unclear. I mean, the intelligence part, it could just be incompetence. You have to kind of sort through it all.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know motives yet. We do know that the intelligence got trapped at a level that did not inform the security plan. That's no longer in doubt. We've been able to get interviews on that, documents on that. There's a famous whistleblower email that I made public last fall in which one of the top intelligence analysts for the Capitol Police said, hey, this was a massive failure. I want you at the top of the department to know that we were kept silent. We were not allowed to tell you the intelligence that was coming in. In other words, this was a preventable attack. And by the way, Chief Sund has said that on many programs, including mine, that if the intel is there, this is probably a preventable attack, which is something no one really wants to hear. That's a difficult scenario to digest.
Yeah, you also, I believe you also have this from Eric Hoare